Hey, strong people, Kalle Beck here, bringing you another episode of the Strong Talk podcast. I want to talk a little bit today about what is going on. This week's guest is Lynn Morehouse of Train Strongman. Just got back, 2 weeks ago now? 3 weeks from his show, Mid-Atlantic Strongman Challenge. So we talked about that the week after. We had the winner of the pro class, Dave Daly, on last week. If you haven't listened to that episode, go check it out. It's a good episode, but what's going on? Where am I going to be next? Next place I'm going to be is at International Strongman 1. It's a new pro federation, pro contest that will be in New Braunfels, Texas on, I believe, June the 9th. It's internationalstrongmanfederation.com. And Robert Oberst is competing, Rob Kearney's competing, Adam Dirks, Ken DeWicki, bunch of cool events. It's part of a big festival. There's tickets available. I'm going to go check it out, interview some of the athletes, and just have some fun. So I'll see some of you there. New products dropping on store.startingstrongman.com. I talked to the owner of Victory Athletics, and they have some awesome knee sleeves, stone sleeves, which I'll be having reviews up shortly. Mike Battolino is testing out the stone sleeves, and I've been using the knee sleeves, and I really like them. When I get sent a product, I go, okay, it's just another copy of this or that. But I was pleasantly surprised. I had previously been using a different brand that's no longer available, and these are hands down better. They're tapered to your leg. They don't bunch up. They give good support, good warmth, and they're not constricting either. So it's Victory knee sleeves, now available at store.startingstrongman.com, along with their stone sleeves, wrist wraps, and more products to come. So definitely check that out. Of course, sign up for Strongman training templates at strongmanprogram.com. And last plug is the Cube Method 3 by Josh Thigpen. You can go back a couple episodes, listen to the episode with Josh. It's starting on the 11th, so May 11th will be the last day to get it at the introductory price of $27, or all three editions for $37. The price will go up on May 12th to $37 and $57. So definitely want to get in on that. There's also a drawing that anyone who buys the book between when we released it and the 11th will be entered into a drawing with a bunch of prizes, including $250 and in cash, a Texas Power Concept circus dumbbell, dual ply knee sleeves, figure eight straps, long socks from us at Starting Strongman, and one-on-one coaching with Josh, etc. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. All right, so this week I talked to Lynn Morehouse about how he got started in the sport, promoting contests, his passion. I think if you haven't heard about what he's doing at Train Strongman, trainstrongman.com, the contest he's putting out, he's promoting in North Carolina. You definitely have to check it out. And he's, glad to call him a friend, and it was a fun discussion. And, his passion for the sport, it really comes through. So I hope you enjoy it from a different aspect of how to get a training crew together, how to promote contests, and the kind of things to think about when trying to promote strongman contests. So enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Strong Talk podcast. I am Kalle Beck, joined by this week's guest, Lynn Morehouse of Train Strongman. I was just out last weekend at the Mid-Atlantic Strongman Challenge, North Carolina, Europa, Charlotte, Europa. There's so many names that you could pick for that contest. I have a hard time thinking of how I'm saying it every time. And so, but it was a pro show. I went out there, and it was nice enough to be invited in December, and then it just comes up real quick, and I go, oh yeah, I got to go to the East Coast this weekend. But it was a fun weekend. I hope you're finally recovering from it, because you were a busy man.
Absolutely, and it wasn't just me. I think the entire endeavor was, I won't say more than I expected, because I expected it to be misery, as far as the leading up to and the packing up. names for the contest has been a challenge from the beginning. So this is the second year doing the Europa in Charlotte. Last year, I had just wrapped up North Carolina's Strongest Man and Woman as a Platinum Plus. And the week after, Dion had given me a call and asked if I wanted to try to do the Europa in 2 months. And that was really a testament of how fast you can come up with a brand new contest. Nothing prepared, and still have it go well. I learned a few things with that because the Europas are 2 days, and that's not all that typical for strongman. Yes, we have nationals and a couple other contests like the Arnold that are 2-day contests. But last year I had attempted a 2-day contest and only ended up with around 50 some competitors. And one of the big learning experiences from that I put towards this contest was it's a lot to ask for people to, take not just Friday off for a weigh-in, but also Monday for a little bit of a recovery, let alone if you're traveling in from out of state. And for a typical level 2 contest, it was just a little too much to ask for a 2-day contest. So for this, it's only been a week ago, the Europa this year, I decided to do a couple of things. One, I was pleased enough with the name Mid-Atlantic Strongman Challenge, and frankly the logo mark that I had created, that I decided to keep that mark. And it's the first time I've done the same image for a contest year after year. And it's actually something I think I'm going to kind of try to keep up with, build a little bit of brand awareness. People like the logo mark, and it actually does save the promoter some work. I do all my own screen printing for all the shirts for the contest. So, 250 shirts screen printed above my garage. It's either me or trying to get some help from some of the other team trained strongman folks. And it takes a lot of work, but if you have to go and burn new screens every single contest, it can be a challenge. So that was one thing that we did. And I went to a day 1 format and then a second contest at day 2. And I went with a team contest, first time doing that. I'll be honest, even though the attendance wasn't there, we had, I think, 28 or 30 athletes. So they were 2-person teams, so 14, 15 teams. It was so much fun.
Yeah, it was a blast.
I've never seen, you've got these exhausted athletes who, a lot of them competed on day 1, PRing their deadlift just because, yes, you get the crowd motivation, but then you get your friend or a gym partner or just a buddy pushing you and a time limit. And the result was probably half the field either tying or creating a new PR on the spot with only 6 minutes to work up to a max. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and they're loading their own bars and too, so that's not a lot of time. But I think it almost it helps because you're almost you don't have a choice to think about it. Your adrenaline never goes up then down while you're waiting to go again. It's gotta load these plates, so you're just riding that high for that whole 6 minutes. I think kind of resulted in some of the PRs.
The strategy was a ton of fun. You saw people spacing out the 25-pound plates just to push more weight on the side. We use Texas deadlift bars, so there's a lot of slack in the bar anyways. Mm-hmm. But if you go and force bunch of 25s out to the side, you can really get a good bar bend. I was really concerned about that event because everyone wanted, or they expected, I should say, an extended bar and 2 people doing the deadlift at the same time. And a good friend of mine, Keith McIntyre, and myself, we competed in the first East Coast Strongest team that John Ward puts on. And we did that lift. We actually didn't win that event, but it's a fun event. But I'll be honest, the way I saw the athletes last week, I think they enjoyed lifting with their friend a lot more than lifting at the exact same moment as their friend. And so it worked out well.
Yeah, I believe so. I think it was a ton of fun. The whole weekend was fun. The day one, I mean, you had 130 or so competitors through a bunch of classes, and
Yeah, we ended up with 131 athletes registered. What I've learned is the bigger the contest, especially if there's pro cards, Arnold invites, those kind of things on the line, you
incentives.
kind of end up expecting about a 10% drop off rate. And this contest ended up probably with about 20 athletes registering but not showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's most of the time because one of two factors. One, they push themselves just a little bit too hard in training and strained something the week or two before.
Sure.
Or two, they signed up because, hey, it's a local show in North Carolina. And then all of a sudden you realize that 80 of the 130 athletes are traveling from all over the United States. And you've got World's Strongest Man competitors, signing up. So
Yeah.
I believe some people saved their money and stayed home as well. And frankly, I would do the same if money was a concern and not just having a good time. I've always been at contests, to have some fun, do my best. But there are a lot of people that, they go to competitions and they expect to podium. And this competition brought out the absolute best for the middleweight going after the pro card. I think we had over 30 athletes registered. And if you compared that list to the top 10 at nationals, you would see amazing representation. It was an incredibly stacked class.
Yeah, and Anthony Furman ended up on top, cutting down from heavyweight, and he looked phenomenal. And it kind of probably kind of irritates everyone else because there's a lot of guys there that have been second, third, going after the pro card, and then this guy loses some weight and shows up, and it's like, crap, we have a whole other person to worry about now. It's you never know who's gonna make that transition, because you see it sometimes. It doesn't work out right, where someone cuts down and they didn't keep it, but he certainly did.
Well, that goes back to, you kind of asked a little bit about trained strongman. And so Anthony, both Anthony and Timothy Bald cut down from about 255, 260. And I say cut, but honestly, it was a very calculated diet over several months.
Yep.
Anthony's was a little bit shorter. He got 20th at the Arnold as a heavyweight, and obviously he wasn't cutting too hard before the Arnold as a heavyweight. But we've got one of the co-announcers for the event, Jenna Petrie, just a fantastic resource for smart dieting, where you don't lose strength. And so we kind of feed off each other as a team. Anthony does training for people. Michael Schultz does training for people. The whole team trains strongman. Is not about, can we have the best athletes that perform the best? It's, can we have athletes that, honestly, they just love the sport and they're doing it for the right reasons. I kind of feel bad for James McGregor. I convinced him to do the team contest with a good friend of mine, Donovan Dakins. He's a team-trained strongman athlete, but, he's one of the originals. He was a colleague from work that I'd convinced to start strongman training with me, and he went from 361 pounds to 231. And, he's never going to be close to a top 10 at nationals for at least a year or two more. But where James McGregor, competed at the Arnold. But he has the right spirit, and it's I'm certain that James and Donovan had a ton of fun, and that was sort of the main goal. But Anthony did an amazing cut, didn't lose any strength whatsoever, and I think he really shocked people because it actually wasn't that close between first and second.
Right, I didn't want to say
dominated.
It, but it was. I remember asking him. He's like, "I'm pretty sure I gotta just show up in this last event and I'm gonna win," which that must be a good
doesn't
feeling.
happen.
No, that's not the norm, and he had a good day for sure. So I want to go back and talk about how you got involved in strongman in the first place, and then how the whole train strongman thing happened from there. I think you kind of touched on it already when you're like, you just want to get good people that are going to help each other to be the best that
Yeah.
they can in the sport and have the right attitude. But like, what was it? What are the origin stories?
Oh gosh. Well, when I'm training some of the younger athletes, it's pretty incredible because I never did any sports as a kid. I wasn't all that athletic. I was part of a video game generation, and I ended up doing my very first show. I go back and forth. I say that I started Strongman for real at 30 years old in 2010. But the truth is, I did a contest that Chris Lawyer, at the time the state chair for Virginia, had put on in 2006. And it was one of those just out of the blue, totally unprepared. I think I PR'd my axle overhead at 210 pounds, less than body weight, with a split jerk, not a press, that kind of thing. But I had a lot of fun. And I ended up talking with Jesse Marunde at the time and realizing that we were both from Alaska and he was living just 30 minutes from my parents. And so we were making plans to meet. And then he kind of had this tragic passing that caught me off guard. And really, I just sort of quit Strongman at that point. I wasn't invested enough. It hadn't changed my life. And then at 30 years old, I already had my first daughter, and I was 261 pounds of desk job fat with no athleticism and I didn't enjoy working out. I wasn't any of those guys who likes curling in front of the mirror, none of that. And I realized I've been watching World's Strongest Man for 30 years, and I absolutely love it. And so I went and bought two Slater's Hardware stone molds, the 16-inch and the 18-inch, making a 175 stone and a 245-pound stone. I could not even get the 245-pound stone out of the dirt hole that I made it. And so I worked with the 175 for quite some time. I had purchased a pair of farmer's handles from another strongman out of Elizabeth City. For some reason, I'm blanking on his name, and I feel so bad. Robert Stallings. And so I had a pair of farmer's handles, an axle, and two stones, and one of them I couldn't even move. And that's how I started training in my house, and people thought I was crazy.
It's typical.
It really is. I found a colleague at work that someone said he was into weird training, and I had spent a month looking for where I could get a free tractor tire, and found a tire recycling yard, and they said I could come there before they opened on a Friday. And I went up and introduced myself to this colleague I'd never met, and it was the most awkward thing ever. I said, "I hear you were also interested in locating large tires."
Yeah, way to broach it nice and smooth.
Yeah, I was very good at this. And, obviously, it went all right. We both played hooky for the morning the next day. And we went to this tire yard, and it was like kids in a candy store, just flipping tires. And I think we ended up with a 300 and a 400, and we just couldn't budge any others. We were just so starting out with such a low base of strength. But we did this at work at lunch in our parking lot. I had a truck at the time, and so I had the tire. We had a little push sled from Dick's Sporting Goods that we ended up doing. And then on Saturdays, people would come over, starting with just my initial friend Shanti. And then I mentioned Donovan, who ended up coming over. And like I said, he started at 361 pounds.
Damn.
And I got him to come over to train on a dare. So he wasn't willing to do it. He had seen us be crazy in the parking lot, and he went and noticed I had two 100-pound plates sitting in my office because the work gym only had two 45s, two 25s. You really couldn't deadlift. Mm-hmm. And he dared me to hold a 100-pound plate over my head for 2 minutes. And I did it, but honestly, I was going to either do it or die because electrical shocks were going through my arms. It was not a good thing. I had never trained for anything like that. I actually didn't know if I could do it, but I did it, and he never missed a weekend. And that's sort of how the very initial things began. You get people to show up, and they have the greatest time of their life, and it's not just lifting, it's feeling empowered, and it becomes, in the beginning, a brotherhood, but we end up with quite a few female, trainees as well. Mm-hmm. And it was just the greatest weekend ever. And it was every single weekend.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. And I think back about that sometimes, because I ended up, that's, I think, what gets all of us into it in the first place. And then, work schedule and busy and this and that, you end up doing it some of yourself. And I've spent like the last couple of years training myself, and I forgot, I'm like, I don't enjoy this anymore. And I realized I'm like, I need to do what you're doing, and travel here or host it there, and just have those Strongman Saturdays or Sundays again, even if it's not ideal mm-hmm. training. It's just everyone's outside, hope if weather permitting, and training, and just it takes 6 hours to do 3 events, but that's really what it comes down to. Why I think we keep coming back to it. If you go back and look at everything, it's not going to the contest or this, it's it's that community. And like when you early 2000s now, so it's getting more and more gyms have it and are getting it like officially, but that's pretty much how you had to start it. Like, I get asked all the time, how do I start a gym? I'm like, get some stuff and find one person near you that wants to also go to your house on a Saturday, and then have it grow from there.
Absolutely. And it will grow from there. I remember with different times so my house didn't have a driveway, it was just on the grass, and there were these huge potholes from dropping stones, because I'd made a little platform. And so we're doing farmers around an obstacle course on grass. I was using the Vibram shoes at the time. It was not ideal. But I would have as many as 17 vehicles just parked all over, trying to figure out a way to get into my yard on a Saturday. And that's where, a little over 3 years ago, I ended up partnering with, a CrossFit gym, and it was the individual. He was, Jonathan Armada. I'd convinced to do one of my first shows as a 175er, to skip novice, and he got 3rd place. Well, he also competed at the Arnold this year in 175. He has kept up with it. He talks about how much Strongman has improved his CrossFit, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
And it's I'll be honest, it's been a strange mix. With partnering with a gym, there's a cost factor, and you will get less people, because not everyone can afford it. Whereas at my house, I would say, bring a side or bring some meat. We'll put it on the grill afterwards, and we'll eat afterwards. Whereas at a gym, in the end, you gotta pay for it somehow, and
some sort of drop in or something.
Correct. It's great for when weather's not nice. It's nice to be on flat ground, things like that. I mean, since then I've gotten a driveway paved, luckily. and
you got the Morehouse Manor out there. I see the the big old house, the big yard.
Well, it wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
I had the garage built.
Right.
And it's funny, a 3-car garage, 1,200 square feet. I've basically got a gym now, and it's a heck of a gym, but I don't train there that often because of that camaraderie. I fuel off of other people, and that's how I got into the sport. It's a shame, because if you really want to be the best, and I think you know this, you have to train the things that you hate doing.
Sure.
But if you want to have fun, you need to train with people and challenge each other, and go and try to one up each other. It's so friendly and so wonderful. I remember gosh, just a few months ago, I was down in Orlando for the kids going to Universal, but I took a 3-hour little side venture to visit Anthony and trained with him. And, what was the plan? No plan. Just pick a lift and I'm going to challenge you. That's where I ended up hitting a 235 pound circus dumbbell, and he had to, I hit 225 and he had to one up me with 235. But it was the greatest time. I truly, those are the moments that I live for, is, going and just training with a friend and being able to share in this experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to remember that. I know when you said like to be the best, you have to do all this stuff. And I definitely got wrapped up in that for a while. And I'm like, I realized at one point, I'm like, sure, I'm good. I think, I'm doing this, I'm going to Arnold's, but like at one point I'm like, I'm not having fun anymore. Like it's like, it seems it seems like an obligation. Like for whatever reason in your own head, you have to hold this up, and you can't, if you got 5th at nationals this year, you can't get 8th this year. And you end up it's like now, when people ask me what I'm trying to do, or are you going to compete or something? I'm like, I'm just trying to find how to have fun, doing event training again. So, and it's starting to happen, which is fun. But I want to get into, so yeah, you build up the whole training crew, you have fun. When do you start promoting contests? That's like I imagine it's going to be the same kind of progression where it's like, well, I don't have anywhere to train, so I need to get this, this, and this. It's like, okay, I'm out in North Carolina. We want to put on some contest. I guess I have to do it. Is my assumption correct?
It's a little bit close, but so in 2013, I promoted my first contest. Now, if you look at the timeline, I got back into Strongman in 2010, lost 60 pounds to get into the under 200 class. And I would compete, but I competed at a contest that was outdoors at a YMCA parking lot. And then I competed at one of the only North Carolina shows there are. I was hanging with the pros, promoted by Cedric, and kind of cool. That's where I got to meet Tom Mutafis and Adam Scher, the only pros in North Carolina at the time, until obviously we have a few now. Mm-hmm. And they were always in parking lots, even Brute Strength Gym. I would drive up to Virginia for that, or at the time the weight room in Richmond. They were in a gym or in the parking lot behind a gym. Sure. And there was nothing wrong with it. It's just, I don't know, felt a little bit like second-class citizens on some of the parking lot ones. And so I said to myself, I think I can do better. And, I feel a little arrogant saying it, but that's kind of what went through my mind. And I've got, a thing on a whiteboard at work that my friend Shanti had written down, where I said, it shouldn't be that hard. And so he immediately wrote it down to make me regret it later. And I did regret it. It was a ton of work. But the very first contest, instead of a contest of 20 and 30 athletes, I had 80. It's about choosing the right events that is a good balance. I kind of embrace the fact that, to me, Strongman is more similar to CrossFit. It's just a different time domain. It's functional, it's varied, as opposed to powerlifting, where, it's always a maximum. It's more stationary. I went with a lot more of the moving, a lot more of the medleys. And, my very first show was the NC Strength Challenge. And I've kept that theme going on, where NC Strength Challenge will be more reps, more moving, more medley based, where NC Strongest I will incorporate, like, the max log for a record, car deadlift, things like that are super heavy. But promoting that contest, I got this panic once all of a sudden I crossed 50 athletes. And as a promoter, you start doing the math and you're like, I'm not going to finish on time. And I had been to a few contests, even with 20.
Yeah, we need to go back there. That shows right there that you're a good promoter, because when you talk to most promoters and you talk about how long it's going to take, and you can kind of figure out, okay, reset the implements, um, how
Hmm.
long the time is. Most of them, a lot of time, people don't even have to think that, okay, this is actually going to take, okay, this event should take an hour and a half. Like the fact that you even decided to do that math, which is fairly simple, shows that you're kind of ahead of the game.
Well, and this was back in 2013.
Yeah.
I'll jump ahead to last weekend. The level that we've gotten to with Train Strongman is incredible. I say we, and it was a group of the Team Train Strongman athletes. We had James Deffenbaugh, Laura Anderson, Chris Jackson, Michael Corson, and myself having several different meetings where we worked through Excel spreadsheets of the amount of time per athlete and trying to figure out the equipment that we have per lane, how many lanes we needed, and being able to figure out how to push that many athletes through, as well as things like, okay, well, let's go and give the pro athletes a little bit of their own special place so that it's easy for them to know where they need to be, things like that. And let's make sure there's no more than, say, 30 to 45 minutes between each event, from the last competitor in a division to the first competitor in the same division. But we went through so many different variations of that. And ultimately, we determined that we needed to go from 2 lanes in the Hummer tire, the tire deadlift, to 4 lanes. That's a big change.
Yeah,
I basically scoured Craigslist and found tires, had my local fabricator go and make me some collars, additional bars being created. And this was maybe 4 weeks before contest day. Yeah. But those kind of decisions I had been making in 2013. I ended up going and doing multiple lanes. And then you have to check on day of, how are you running? And you compare it to a schedule. And even back then, we realized on different occasions that if it's going slow, you need to be able to have another event that can get started. You obviously don't want that to be the ideal, because it's harder for spectation. And then obviously when you get to things like live streaming, it's even harder. Sure. But the other side of having a contest go until 8 or 9 o'clock at night is just not acceptable. And as an athlete, I'm always making a checklist of every contest I've ever been to. Things like, weigh-ins, things like how long the competition takes, things like, well, between this event I had an hour and a half, and between this event I had 15 minutes. That makes a difference. And we spend an abnormal amount of time beforehand making these spreadsheets to make sure that on contest day we have a plan.
Yeah, I think I want to see if you agree, but what I've found from my own contest experience and helping at, or just being around, or promoting a show or two, that you can stress out about everything, but pretty much it comes down to everyone's happy as long as it ends in a reasonable amount of time and the judging was fair and consistent. Like if you do those two things, I think everything, like you could not have as good of trophies. It could, the weights could have been too light, all those other things. But if you do those two things, I feel like all the competitors are pretty happy at the end of the day.
Absolutely. There's a priority to everything, and fair judging and equal judging is number one. And then just the flow of the contest and the, you can go too fast, you can go too slow, but in the end, people get tired, they get stiff. You can always tell by the 5th event. Of course, I love ending with stones. This past contest, the team contest had stones, but we had max keg over bar. You can always tell towards the end because a lot of athletes won't even warm up. They're like, I'll see what happens.
You kind of don't need to at the end, but yeah. I hear you.
Yeah, they're just trying to stay moving without pain.
Sure.
Uh, but yes, there's a few very important things that you have to make sure that you get down, and judging is a very critical one. I get a lot of volunteers, because I ask for it, and I end up working most of them half to death. But you get quality volunteers at this past contest. I had one volunteer who just amazed me, Danielle Curry, and you think, okay, what makes her such a good judge? Well, she's a world record holder in multiple sports.
Yeah, amazing
She
athlete.
knows what a good lift is, and she doesn't take any shit, which is nice. You need to be able to put up with that, because the more competitive a class gets because of either a pro card or an Arnold invite, you're going to see people trying to squeak out, some questionable calls. And I mean, even from the pros, we've had some situations where, no, I'm sorry, you went ahead and started going down before the judge said you were good. And you need someone who's going to be able to hold their own against even a much larger athlete who's, as intense as they'll ever be in that moment.
They ain't gonna like you, man. That's
No.
that's the thing I have the biggest problem with judging is like, we did, just 2 weeks ago I did California Strongest Woman, and we told them like, you can't. I reminded everyone before we went. There was a deadlift medley. It was 4 parts, and I said you can't just let it go at the top. Like,
Yep.
I don't care if you fake that your knees bent to put it down. That's fine. Just don't like ghost write it. And man, and people get all caught up, and they're used to how they train, and they just drop it right from the top, and you're yelling at them, and they're pretty much on to the next implement, and man, they give you the death stare when you made them go back. And there was in a couple of situations that was the difference between them getting first. So, but it was
Gotta show the Eddie Strongman on Netflix.
Exactly.
Show them the result of dropping a deadlift from the top. And what I end up happening with medleys is people do the quick rep, and yes, they reached lockout, but they started to bend. They didn't hold it for the judge.
Yeah.
And I see it in training, and I think that's one of the things that I bring to the table in the training is I tell people, don't train different than you're going to compete. Hold each rep for, a beat, just enough for a judge. Try to make eye contact. Don't be staring at the implement. Stare forward. Little things like that will make a difference when you actually go to compete.
Yeah, you can stare a judge right in the eye intensely, and your elbow might be a little bent, but they're still going to stay down because you're drawing their attention from what they're actually supposed to be looking at. Those are the other.
Supposed to point out the cheats.
Oh, that's what this whole show's about. Is I'm not competing, so I just want to tell everyone how to cheat because I love cheating. In the end, it's fun. I like when I see someone get away with something and game it a little bit. Not when they're doing bad, but like the little stuff, like when you see like Stumpy Reigns in 2001, use a little bit of duct tape to hold on to the Africa stone, and then they had to tell them afterwards they have to make a rule. I like whenever there's a rule made after a lift, like,
oh yeah.
I think that stuff's when people game it a little bit. I think it's one of the beauties of the sport is, finding a little, or just even like Kaz, they made the rule that you have to lift the stones lightest to heaviest because of him.
Yep, no one would have thought about it, and he thought about it in comparison to his strengths, and it worked out well. The downfall is the rules meeting becomes sometimes ridiculous, where people are asking if they can wear a squat suit on yoke, and I'm just like, go ahead.
Right.
You'll see how bad of an idea that is.
Yeah. So, yeah, no kidding. So you promote your first show, you get up to 50 competitors. I think a good point you're making is that you made it kind of it seems like it was like a lighter show, a little lower barrier entry, which is a great way to build up the sport if it's not established in your area. People kind of go on and, they kind of bag on if a contest is too light, but I feel, not every contest should be too light, but I feel like every area should have one of those contests that pretty much anyone can sign up for and feel okay doing, and then they're going to realize that it's not as scary as they thought, and then they can go do the state championship you also promote later in the year or whatever.
Absolutely. And I'll give you sort of the feedback that I heard from the strongman community. And I say it, but it was maybe a dozen people in North Carolina at the time.
Right.
And they said, you know, Lynn's not promoting strongman. He's promoting CrossFit. He has too many novices. There's too much movement. And now I just had 131 people register for a competition with no novice. And I just got most
events.
Middleweights to PR their yoke, because a lot of these athletes, even the heavyweights, they've never tried 1,000-pound yoke, or, you know, the middleweights, a 900-pound yoke. And I just designed it in a way that, yes, you still need to think about, you don't want a field to zero. That is a failure on the promoter if every single person fails. And, you know, there's actually video of, I think, last year's North Carolina Strongest Man, where I was scared. And it was with the Platinum Plus, so a combined middleweight of 200-pounders and 231s. And every single 200-pounder was failing the car deadlift. And I had tested the vehicle, but, you know, if you haven't trained on a car deadlift, it's different than a deadlift.
Yep.
But when the last 200-pounder, I can't pronounce his name, but Andrew from Virginia, went and got his first rep, you saw like 150 people cheer. And I remember this one spectator gave me this look because I was cheering so loud. And he gave me the look that read my mind, which is like, oh, thank goodness. But, you know, the 231s had no problem with it. They were able to get some reps. But it, you know, it would have been my fault, frankly, if an entire field of athletes failed a lift.
Yeah, and
that shows that I'm out of touch.
It's hard to gauge, you know, and that's a question I get a lot, is how to pick event selection. I feel a lot of the people in this sport, they kind of follow what they are. So if you're a heavyweight guy, you know what heavyweight guys are or something. Like I can talk, like, you know, hanging out with Obi all weekend, and, you know, we're saying, this person, I talked to them, and, you know, hey, are they any good? Because he doesn't really know. He doesn't know, like, he knows, but, you know, he's at World's Strongest Man, and that's the, you know, what he pays attention to is that kind of level. But it's like, you know, a lightweight woman, I'm like, oh yeah, no, they did like they deadlifted like 375, and he's like, what is that? Like, what is that in comparison to the norm? You know, not that many people, I'm not singling them out, but, you know, that's pretty similar. They kind of know what weights work for, you know, their peers, and then from there, it's there's a lot of variables and a lot of different body types. Let me know if this is something I've found, which I want to run it by you. Like, so I've found if you go from super heavyweight, which I feel the majority of people have the best understanding of what weights are for like a heavyweight guy, right? And it seems like if you pick those weights, and just this is to establish a baseline, and then you go down, and, you know, as you go down class, like middleweight, you know, 200, 175, heavyweight women, etc. If you go down each time about 10%, it kind of works out close, and then you can kind of mess with it from there and go, oh, this is a little too heavy, this is little too light. What's
I do it slightly different because I compete in 231 middleweight. And I know where I stack up against the competition. So I actually start with my weight class.
Makes sense.
And I'm lucky to have, you know, I mention all the time this team around me. And, you know, I'll say, okay, 200 pounders. And I think about my contest event prep very much as I don't want a lot of zeros, but I want very few people who, it's very obvious who the winner is. So if it's a medley, I want very few people to actually be racing for time. Most people are racing to finish. And, you know, so I look at myself and I think of, well, at local shows, you know, normally I'm podium finisher. So I'll put that kind of in my mind. And then I've got Keith McIntyre as a podium finisher in 200s. Laura Anderson is a lightweight woman, but never treat her that way. Always plan for middleweights because she's too darn good as a lightweight. Then I'll go and say, okay, well, I've got Michael Schultz, as a super heavyweight. What can he do? And it ends up being where if you get a couple of key frames, you can do that equal progression up. And if it's something like a yoke, you can think about, okay, it's 50-pound jumps or 100-pound jumps, and you think about how you're placing the weights on the equipment. And it's amazing the female athletes have gotten so darn good that there are times now where they're right up there with the 175 men on the weights that I'm programming, and let alone if you have a novice class. If we had a novice class last weekend in Europa, the women would have been doing more weight than the novice men.
Oh,
absolutely.
For sure.
I would have programmed it that way. They are incredible. You see, Brittany Cornelius do a 600-pound deadlift, and then, you let a small tear go out,
It looks like she could have pulled it for 10.
Absolutely. But no, I don't start with heavyweight. I think that's probably because you have the relationship with Oberst. I go and base off of myself, and then I sort of go up and down, and I've got enough athletes. And the most critical thing is test your weight.
Yeah, no kidding.
Absolutely. Even things like car deadlift. I went out to the place where I was getting vehicles, and we had a car deadlift test day. The only event that I can think of in recent history that I had not been able to prepare for was a truck pull that we did at Dorton Arena 2 years ago, North Carolina Strongest Man. I had been trying to find a truck heavier than the 26-foot Penske truck for a while. And the day before, a friend had located a garbage truck that was like 34,000 pounds. And so I'm like, bring it in. Well, I got Faisal Soliman, who is one heck of a 175er.
Yep. And
he started pulling it, and I was like, okay, if this guy can pull it, at least for a few feet, we'll be good. Well, what they didn't realize is one of the tires was almost flat. So 34,000, it weighed so much more than that.
Yeah. Vehicle
I only had... Yes. I only had 2 or 3 athletes finish that pull. And people were complaining about the crease in the concrete at Dorton Arena, which is a smooth, flat floor.
Hey, man,
but they were like, yeah,
I'm sure it was
right
there. You never
Yes.
You never understand how uneven a floor or a parking lot is until you do strongman. That's what I look at it, and like if I show up to an event, I'm the state chair, and I got to look. I go, especially if I'm coaching some athletes and there's any sort of event like that, man, I've learned a long time ago. I'm like, I look and I'm like, I walk it like you would like playing golf or something. I'm like, okay, there's this painted line right here. Make sure not to step on that. And you got to build up the momentum because they're like, you see where it dips down and then it goes back up, and they're like, where? And I'm like, trust me, it's there. You just don't know it yet. And then you see everyone get stuck in that same spot. Yeah, but it's
absolutely the distances proved it. Everyone was, especially like the 200 pounders, 231s. They all hovered around where that scene was. But that was a decision. But then I decided, and this is a danger zone for any promoter, I decided to have the women do the Penske truck. Well, that was going to be the men's truck, and the amount of just freak out that I got from the athletes was, it made sense. But then you go and see the result on people's faces, where I would say only a handful of people did not finish the poll. And just the sheer joy of doing more than they ever thought they could do was so worth it to me. But occasionally you have to do that. And I go back to last weekend with the yoke, 3 different yokes, about 100 pounds heavier each one. I thought about the middle one being a normal nationals type level yoke. And so you do one lighter so that you kind of, no one zeros, and then you do one heavier. That's where you get to test your grit. And the getting people to do more than they've ever done is probably the biggest joy out of promoting, just watching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a cool thing about the sport where the weights are set for you and you either have to rise to the occasion or not. One of the reasons why I feel like this sport makes you stronger, not just physically than other ones where you can kind of pick your own attempts, but mentally as well, because you have to have that mindset. Going back, I want to mention like that's not how, like when I say I program weights and go from the heavyweight down, that's not what I do. I do more of your approach because I have familiarization with so many athletes, but I'm talking about someone who doesn't. Like when I get asked the question, I'm like, here's a good way to figure out a baseline, right? Because I can't, because I get people like, even when you're a state chair, they immediately are like, I want to do these 5 events. What should I put every weight for every weight class? And I'm like, I do not have time to go over 7 weight classes and figure this all out for you. And even you know what I mean? So I'd go here, figure it out, do that, and then show me, and I'll tell you to make this 10 pounds heavier, 20 pounds lighter, or whatever, just to get a baseline.
That'll get you get you close enough. And,
exactly.
Then you make adjustments based on, when you're promoting, you need to think about how to optimize things. So your weight changes, and, I'm actually pretty bad at this where, there are things that could be easier to do, but I choose to do what looks better. So, I remember last weekend I went and switched out the tires for the pros so that they could get to 4 tires. And I went and asked them, would you guys like to do a 60-pound jump instead of 50? Here's the benefit. You get 4 tires on each side. Everyone wants this photo op. The crowd wants it. Are you willing to go 10 pounds heavier? And things like that on the fly, frankly, are a big disruption, but it sets a contest apart. It really does when you can go and choose to make something where it goes back to what Strongman's about. It's a spectacle sport.
Absolutely.
If you go and do everything, and the stones at the contest went up to 22 inches. Why? Because you end up with a photo that Bob has, who competed in the 231s, and he's holding a 22-inch stone, and it looks like that there's no way in heck he can ever do this thing. And so a lot of my stones have the foam cores, or they've been lightened up in different means, rather than adding lead to a 20-inch or an 18-inch. Just because it's easier and they'll lift more weight. I think about what the spectacle is, what's going to make the better photo op, what's going to make the audience say, wow. And a lot of them don't understand how heavy things are. And so you start getting creative with, well, this looks heavy. And that's where car deadlift, I think, is just amazing, because people don't truly understand the science behind it. And, it just looks awesome, and everyone is amazed that you lifted a car. And, it's what Strongman's all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like, and that's something I've been stressing on lately is, all these contests, especially at the pro level, they keep making them heavier and heavier, and you see all these guys just getting beat up, but they're not making them look any more impressive. So it's like, what are you putting these guys' bodies through? And it's not going to grow the sport. The people that are walking by the Europa, they're not more impressed because it's a 300-pound heavier yoke than it was. It's like, just make it the same weight, but throw some tires on the side or something, like make it look right. Have more spectacle, especially if you're running like a show that like a pro show that's going to have 8 to 12 people. You can have more time to do like a truck pull or whatever. You're not running 100 and something people.
So you have to get creative as a pro, programming your contest. So as a promoter, you think about the equipment that you have, and then how you can reuse it. When we plan a contest, occasionally I end up vetoing what is most, beneficial for me, and doing what I want, which is not a great habit.
Right.
I brought a dozen stones, well, technically 14 stones for a 12-stone series just for day two, the team contest. That's a lot to bring just for them. I had kegs.
Absolutely.
We could have done keg over bar for reps. But one of the things that I kind of see as separating me from a lot of other people, and separating the contests that we've been able to promote, is we don't go the easy route. Yes, we can absolutely do axle for overhead, then axle deadlift, and then, using an axle with weights as a singles fingers. At a certain point, no, just choose something else. So there are instances where you talk about like trying to make the yoke look more impressive. Now that I've got all these tires, I absolutely am going to fabricate something to hook on these tires on the side of the yoke, because it does make it look more impressive. You've got all these kegs because you did a keg over bar, or you did a keg series. Use the kegs as weights on another event, like a sled drag or something. Use the kegs as weights. You can get creative. One of my favorite events I've ever competed in, and I just haven't invested the money to fabricate up some wheelbarrows, is the keg carry and wheelbarrow push medley that we did at Nationals in Texas a few years ago. That was just so much fun. I love that.
It was almost fun for me. I preferred the time I did it the year before at the Arnold, where I got second in the event.
Oh.
Not the year where I totally forgot you're supposed to load everything at the front, and I screwed that up, and pretty much by that messed up my chance at winning that Nationals. Up until that point, I was doing good, and it should have been a good event for me. But yeah, it's how it goes. It's still a fun event. It looks cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more fun when you run with it and you're smart about it than when you make it so heavy that it keeps slipping out of your hand halfway through.
That's what separates Strongman a little bit. There is a lot of technique and strategy.
Man, I can't tell you how many I watch every time. Like if that video pops up in my time hop or whatever on Facebook, I'll go back and rewatch it. And I was going against, the competitor who won the 175s, and pretty much since then has won almost every 175 contest, Patrick Castelli. I was head to head with him in that event, and I was beating him we got to the wheelbarrow, and I just threw everything in. I'm like, I got to stay ahead of Pat. And I just went, and he took his time. He pushed everything to the front, and he was like way behind me. And then halfway down, it just keeps slipping out of my hands because it was so heavy and it was on my grip. And there he jumps trudging along and gets second or third in the event. So like I was on pace to win it, but that's exactly how it goes. It's not always about being the strongest or this. Of course, Pat's extremely strong. I'm not saying I'm stronger than him, but he was a smarter, better competitor in that instance. And that's the difference between, first and fifth or whatever. That's how it goes. And that's why I love the sport.
Yeah, that was the first time I saw Mark Taysom shoulder a keg and carry it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different technique. I think people don't realize that Strongman has so many different variations to work with your own body, and you need to find either what works for you or a coach that knows different things. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy circus dumbbell because of that technique aspect. I've seen people just zero, and then all of a sudden you show them this one little tweak and they're repping the same weight out just moments later.
Yeah, it's a very technical lift. So we're about wrapping up. I got speaking of circus dumbbell technique, do another one of these with Dave Daly just shortly.
Oh yeah.
So we'll definitely keep talking about that, but I want to just quick points on promoting a show. What to just like the quick bullet points on the things we've kind of covered them, but let's condense it on just some of the aspects to think about.
I can definitely do that. The shortest thing is get a team behind you. You can't do it alone. I don't think that I would have been nearly as successful if it wasn't for the people that worked with me from the beginning. And at the very beginning in 2013, it was Steve Trippi as one of my main assistants on the promotion side. And then, as I mentioned before, I've got half a dozen to a dozen people that are intimately involved with the planning sessions beforehand, let alone 30 volunteers day of. And even then, it can be just so much work to pull it off. You have to be prepared for it. Treat your volunteers well, probably even better than I treat them right now. Go ahead and do more than just, drinks and breaks and food. Understand that they're volunteering their time and they're in it with you. Go ahead and, have it all planned out. What we did at this last contest, Laura and James were fantastic at this. I let Laura sort of run with the volunteer coordination. And you talk about a judge has a scribe to write things down. You have 2 loaders. These 4 people are a unit. Keep them together so that they can start to work together. Then you think about you need an athlete wrangler. So you've got one person who's at the gateway from the athlete warm-up area to the competition area. He's letting people know what divisions are out there, what the next 3 athletes are coming up. That is a critical role that a lot of competitions just don't have. And that'll allow you to stay on your pace that you set up. But I would say the biggest thing is know who your volunteers are before the day of, and make sure that they understand what they're being asked to do. And then treat them nice. Give them some food, give them some water, give them a break if you can. And it's even better when you can plan those breaks into the event. Like we ended up needing 6 judges. So we had 4 lanes going on one event, and then only a head-to-head 2 lanes on another event. Well, that meant that while there was a little break between when we're resetting, most of those judges can go get something to eat, use the restroom, scribes, the volunteers. You don't realize that it may have been 5 hours since they've used the restroom.
Yeah.
So get a good team behind you. That's the most critical. If you think you're going to promote a contest, the very first thing you should do is have half a dozen people who are willing to do it with you. I get a lot of the credit online, and I'm getting better over the years of acknowledging the people that have gotten Train Strongman to where it is, where we're promoting, frankly, some of the best contests in the country. And I try to stay humble, but at some point I'm also pretty darn proud. And so I want to show off the fact that if you have not competed in a Train Strongman contest, you don't know what you're missing, because you're going to go against the best people in the world. You're going to finish on time. You're going to get tested in the event as well as through the competitive atmosphere, and you're going to feel like an athlete. That's the biggest thing. Whether you're competing at an arena or in a convention center, we even adjusted our crowd control to have little pockets where we could get more spectators in and around the athletes. We are going to make the event special for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I saw it last week, and not only that, you're missing on the best part. You get a really nice event shirt. I need to talk to you off air on what the actual brand is, because I'm going to make all my shirts with this material now, because I'm wearing it right now. So it's nice.
Well, I can definitely help with that, and I can even give tutorials on how to screen print it yourself if you really want to get excited. But no, I could talk to you for hours, Kalle.
Absolutely.
So you just let me know any questions you guys have in the future, anything on Facebook or on Starting Strongman. I'm definitely in this to keep promoting and growing the sport. It changed my life from 261 pounds of desk job fat and being tired with my daughter to now, I can do handstands with my daughter while they're doing gymnastics. I'm running around. If you do Strongman right, it will change your life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. A good way to end it. And it's trainstrongman.com, Train Strongman, Instagram, Facebook, everything. And of course, Lynn Morehouse on Facebook as well. And so and then all your events are up there. I think that's one of the other things to touch on is how well you advertise each one of your events. If you just go on trainstrongman.com, go to the events, you break down every event, you have all the athletes updated. You post a screenshot of their Facebook in the Facebook event page every time they sign up, and it makes them feel special. When you said you make them feel like an athlete, I think that's the biggest takeaway. We all, if you're listening to this and you compete, you know how much time it takes and you sacrifice between all of your vacation times probably spent competing, pretty much all your money. You drag your family to these things when you could go on like a real vacation. They'd probably enjoy more, but you do it so you want to make it feel special when you get there and do it, because it's important to remember that as promoters, I feel. So again, want to thank you again for coming on and having me out there, and can't wait for the next one and doing this again. And like we said, we could anytime you call me, it ends up being 45 minutes, but we're actually trying to record a subject, it could be 3 hours.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to have a chance to chat with you and share some of the tips and tricks. Obviously, anyone can message me directly, or we can schedule more like a Q&A session. But I definitely want to keep things going. I love what you've been doing with Starting Strongman over the past few years. The sport is growing, and I'm just loving the ride.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it was a good chat, and we'll do this again soon, and have a great rest of your day.